Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
You are watching a Fact TV presentation of the Town of Rockingham Select Board Meeting.
It's Tuesday, December 19th, 2023 at 6 p.m. We are in the lower theater. There's a Zoom link on the agenda that can be found on the rockvf.org website. Also a phone number there if you can't get on to that link. That being said, our first order of business today is to act as the Board of Liquor Control. We have one application on hand for Penguin Mart LLC. Don't see anything wrong with it. Somebody will entertain a motion and we'll move this thing right out of here.
Move to approve a second-class liquor license for Penguin Market LLC.
Second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the liquor license for Penguin Mart LLC. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Coming around. Go that way. That being done, I will call the regular select board meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of December 5, 2023. Take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of December 5, 2023.
Do we hear a second?
I second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of December 5th, 2023. Any further discussion, deletions, corrections, omissions, et cetera, et cetera? I have one. I don't know if anybody else got it.
What is it?
Page 2, number 4, Highway Department. Greater trade-in would be roughly $279K, and this would maintain the equipment schedule and get it back in the black. That's incorrect. The $279K is the amount of cost of the grader, and the trade-in value is around $125,000. So that will need to be corrected. Other than that, I have none. Anyone else? Going once? Sold. All those in favor of approving the minutes of December 5th would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Hey, public additional items to be added to the agenda that will require future action, ratification at a future meeting.
No.
The board? Oh, get right by that one. Public comment on items not on the agenda, 3 minutes a person. Big crowd here tonight, folks. I guess we're not gonna have any.
There's a hand up.
Jamie? Jamie, is that you? Yeah.
It is. Hey, good evening, everybody. Hey, so just a quick follow-up from the joint board and the last meeting. Are we making any headway on getting all the information from 3 fire departments for our feasibility study to be able to present something in the next joint board meeting?
Yes. Proceedings can be expected, Jamie. I guess we're all set.
Question
Ah.
for you, Bert.
Looking forward with anticipation. Rick, you have a comment?
Recommendations will be part of the report from Trident rather?
The January 30th report will be an interim. It won't be the full report because they won't have finished the site visit by then, but we'll have enough to be able to start working on all of those pieces.
Anyone else? Seeing none, let's move right on to the manager's report.
Thank you. Couple things. First of all, community event. Our highway department takes the Holiday of Lights parade of lights very seriously, and they did a nice job for the second year in a row and was awarded the Cheer Miser Award. It's not Meister, it's Miser. But in all seriousness, we appreciate they do enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's good for morale and camaraderie. It's turning into a very nice event. Thank you to the folks that organize it, thank you to the folks that go out and help it happen. So we're looking forward to that. It's becoming a nice annual event.
And I believe all the time for that was on their own time, not on town time, correct?
Some of that was during the day,
Right.
when we had to do some stuff at the yard, but nothing was on overtime or any extra time.
Okay.
Couple things. The state is extending our previous disaster declaration for reimbursement through next July. So we're still working on a couple things. We haven't finished our Williams River Bridge and a couple of our reimbursements, so that gives us more time. And unfortunately, there was quite a few communities that suffered additional problems yesterday, so I'm guessing there'll potentially be another declaration that might actually then continue this. Unfortunately, it seems to be a pattern that we're in. The Humane Society, and this is more just as a community sort of awareness, but also since we have a contract through the board, just so the board's aware, the Humane Society is going in a construction mode. They're doing some renovations. So while they're doing the renovations, their sheltering operations are going to be severely restricted. So it's going to be a little more difficult to take dogs, and also their adoption programs are going to be impacted. So they're hoping to be back in their new space sometime in the summer, sometime in July. So we're going to see how this works and hope that we don't run into issues as we go forward, but just as an FYI, there are going to be some impacts as they go through that construction. The last thing is just, and it's just a general informational item for the board, every year our insurance providers makes slight changes to the programs that they offer. This year, under the medical reimbursements, the Blue Cross Blue Shield is actually going into a new provider, new partner for the medical reimbursement program that we already fund, so we're not changing any of that. But it's now going into a new HRA, and there'll be some rollovers and some other improvements in that program. So we'll incorporate that into our employee handbooks, and hopefully you'll see some of that in January. But this is just part of their ongoing program upgrades. So this will be a good thing. And I think, quite frankly, we'll be talking probably later on in the budget just about how much insurance is impacting our overall year-to-year budget discussions. So that was it.
Okay, quick question. Our animal control services are still happening the way they have been?
Not sure. It could be in transition. It's unclear at the moment.
And will you be having a discussion
Yes.
about that?
I'll let you know shortly. I'd hope to know by tonight, but we're still not 100% there.
Okay.
You have something on the screen there.
So Lenovo wants to update. Don't update. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move right into the agenda and approval of Wyndham Regional Brownfields Reuse Initiative Program.
So, thank you. You had walked this through as a agenda item that was added to the agenda at the last meeting. So this is just now posting it on the published agenda and moving that forward. The first phase of looking at the Zero Bridge Street property and seeing, what items might need to be addressed as part of the Regional Brownfields program. So that's federal monies. We don't put any of our money into that process. And then, as we discussed, and Gary and I will have a more up-to-date presentation to the full board in January, working on the area-wide plan implementation and searching for some public-private partnership investments. We're looking at a couple of opportunities now. The village is stepping forward with some funds to help us with that process. So we'll give the board a more in-depth review of where we stand and how we see that process going forward in January.
Question?
Rick, hey, you're busy tonight.
Yeah, we own the parking lot, the town,
Yes.
and will that loss of parking capacity affect our plans for anything else?
Well, I wouldn't call anything, don't start with that, because we'll have a room full of people screaming. We're not proposing any loss of parking of any type whatsoever at the moment. All we're doing is a preliminary evaluation of what's underneath that parking lot, and then incorporating it into a discussion about what other options are available within the area-wide plan. So our goal has always been to maintain, or hopefully maybe even increase parking. So that will be our guiding light in this whole process.
And this is some years off, this is two,
This is
three-
very preliminary. We are very early into a long process. Yes.
The only other comment I have is the item on the first, on the back page. Town will be asked to donate the property, contribute the property to the project. Don't make everybody aware of that.
So the developers won't be paying anything for the property?
Nope, they want it free.
Well, I think all of those details, I think, are going to be discussed and will ultimately, if we do land and development agreements, they'll all be contained within a fully negotiated and approved development agreement, which will come through the board. I think part of the goal of attracting private investment is trying to make that site as attractive as possible to attract the private investment. So that's one of the options on the table. It won't be the only option, and certainly the board will have plenty of opportunity in the public to weigh in on that long before we get to the point where that decision is finalized.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
The only other thing is that, I don't know if anybody read the paper this morning, the Reformer also had a notice that the village has appropriated some ARPA funds for the project. It is a town-owned property, so I don't know if anybody wants to make any comments before this gets somewhere down the road. I know it's like Scott said, everything's preliminary, and this is just on the study of the property to see what's going on, so I just thought it'd be appropriate for the town to comment. I mean, they're always coming after us to make comments from the village, so turnabout's fair play
Right.
before we ask for a motion here. So-
It's negotiable in the future.
So, everything's negotiable, right, Gary? Gary gives us thumbs up, remember, right there, make a note of
All
that.
right. Because we could, for example, offer tax incentives instead of giving them the property. There are lots of inducements that we
Oh,
could.
yeah, there's all different avenues, I'm sure.
All right.
Gary will have his work cut out for him to
All right.
figure out how he's gonna deduce that,
All
but.
right. Thanks.
Jamie has a hand up.
Jamie, you got a question again?
Yes, I do. Just for clarity, which exact Ridge Street property are we talking about? I understand we're gonna go into more detail in another meeting next month, but
It's the parking lot right by the canal. Just be over the bridge, you take the left, quick left right there, Buckley's office was there.
Where the Elks used to be.
okay, all right, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, let's take a motion to approve the Wyndham Regional Brownfields Reuse Initiative Program and authorize the manager to sign the document.
So moved.
Is
I'll
there a
second that.
Motion made and seconded to approve the Wyndham Regional Brownfields Reuse Initiative Program. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor would say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll add that to the file. Also, in your packet, there is an accompanying sheet that tells you the manager updates, and it's all numbered so they can correlate to the agenda items on the thing, so we can go down through, that gives you a quick synopsis there. All right, we're gonna move into a public hearing for the Bells Falls Garage, BFG 07110 IG-2109, Rockingham-17. This is a, I'll read the introduction. It's to close out the grant process. So I'll open the meeting and open the public hearing for the Vermont Community Development Program's Community Development Block Grant of $292,745 for the Bells Falls Garage Mixed Use Development Project. This public hearing is to obtain the views of citizens on community development, to furnish information concerning the range of community development activities that have been undertaken under this program, and to give affected citizens the opportunity to examine the statement of the use of these funds. Development Director will present an overview, and then the floor will be open for comment. Gary, you have the floor.
The funding stack for the low-income housing tax credit facilities is extensive. And for a just under $10 million project, one of the town's contributions is to be the grantee for the Vermont Community Development Program. And that program is block grant money, and the national objective that we are helping meet for those funds, the national objective required is low and moderate income, and the state objective for those funds is housing. And so that was the goal the town is required to meet the objectives. And for schedule, the project was 2 months behind schedule, given the times during COVID and the labor pool. The builders, Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, felt it was really good given the labor market. The final construction cost, the project was on budget. Final construction cost was $7,494,683.37. And the final development cost was $9,998,562.35. And basically, it breaks down to a final cost per unit of $317 cost to build each apartment unit. And so the housing folks, Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust folks, said that was a little surprising. That was the project they did during COVID, and prices have escalated. But at a Vermont Housing Finance Agency meeting where they're rolling out current funding to help with the housing crisis, they said that cost per unit is approaching $700,000. So building a couple of years ago, got away okay being able to do those 27 units. The Bells Falls Garage building was nominated for some design and construction awards. And so we should know about those early in the coming year. And let's see. So of the 27 units, 20 of them are affordable housing units, and their affordability is guaranteed for 100 years. The number of market rate units built was 7. And the number of units subsidized with a project-based rental assistance was 19. Total number of units that are 504 accessible is all 27. And all 27 units were rented by the time they opened. And so I guess that's really the basic nut of it. Is there any questions or?
Public comment session is now open. Trying to steal my thunder here. Rick has one
One
again.
question, how many residents do we have in that building?
Oh, good question. I think it's 44, but let me just check that. Yeah, total number of people in the building, living in the building is 44.
Okay, thank you.
One item I'd mention, it says here that the public minutes, the minutes of this public hearing need to be cut out of the regular select board minutes so they can be uploaded to the GEARS
Yes,
online grant management system. So make sure that's taken care of.
Will do.
All right, any other questions, suggestions from the raving crowd here? Okay, seeing none, I will now close this public hearing. Thank you, Gary.
No, wait,
Thank you.
Hey, Deb, right.
Oh, Deb, right. Oh, sorry, didn't miss you
I
there.
did. I just wanted to ask, what is the total capacity of that building supposed to be? Please.
Capacity of the building. So they don't have it listed by capacity, but they're mostly single bedroom apartments. They have a few 2-bedroom apartments. but they don't, there's not a specific capacity for them.
Okay, but, all right, so you said 44 are being housed right now. That means it's not full. Okay.
Yeah, I guess you could have, 2 residents or 1 resident living in a single unit apartment, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Jamie, your hand's up again, I see.
Yeah, well, Deb brought up a good point, and it may be occupancy of the apartments or whatever, but I'm sure our fire chief or somebody went in to do a final inspection of the building. There should be something documented somewhere, especially with state funding, on a total capacity and occupancy for that building that should actually be a placard or something in the building, I would imagine. So it'd be a good follow-up to get that information.
Yes, I'll get that number off the building, and it'll be reported at the next meeting, and it will be an addendum to the minutes that are published from the public meeting.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Okay, now I can close the meeting. Is there anyone else? No, don't see anything else up there. All right, let's move on to approve the proposed donation and scope of tree work, Rockingham Meeting House. There is information in your packet. It was discussed at our cemetery committee meeting last night, and I think Jim drew the low straw to show up tonight. So, there is 2 motions, and when we get done, with Jim's presentation, we need to read the second motion if we're agreeable. Jim, you have the floor.
Okay. We received a donation to the Rockingham Meeting House Association for $11,250, and the Meeting House Association and the Historic Preservation Commission asked me to develop a list of tree work that needed to be done. And then I transmitted that to 8 tree companies, and we got 3 responsive proposals. The lowest proposal was from Arbor Climb for $1,600 more than we had in the donation. So I sat down with them and negotiated which trees, what work would be cut out of the list. There's 32 trees that we called out. And the trees that we removed from doing were extremely minor. They were aesthetic, mostly aesthetic. And a lot of them could be done by volunteer, like removing a 3 or 4 inch black locust that just didn't seem like the right tree to be put in that. So the Arbor Climb has an excellent reputation. They have 2 certified arborists on staff with them. It's a small staff. They do the work for the Army Corps of Engineers. They do the work for Stewart Property Management that manages the Canal House. And they'll be doing the work in March. And it became apparent in talking to these contractors that putting this type of work out for proposals in the winter is a good thing to do, because there's one of them telling me that there's 5 other cemetery groups looking for work this winter. So you can get a good price. The cemeteries are closed. We got a really excellent price because we went around the whole Rockingham Meeting House grounds, including the 2 access roads. We came out with 32 trees, and almost all of them are going to be worked on. I really expected this to take a couple of years, to, a couple of donations to do it. So the request is to approve a motion to award a bid to Arbor Climb for $11,250.
And I think, Jim, also, there'll be a donation, right, that'll also.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'll pay the bill, but it'll.
Yeah.
Right.
The town will contract with Arbor Climb, and then the Rockingham Meeting House Association will reimburse you for the $11,250. No cost to the town.
Hey, everybody, any questions for Jim?
I just had a question. I noticed that that Norway maple was taken out. Are there a lot of Norway maples up there?
No,
Because
it's
those are
only one.
invasive. Okay.
In fact, all the trees around the whole cemetery are the survival of the fittest. Whatever was able to outcompete are the ones that are there. Even there's one tree in the cemetery itself,
And that, if you look at it closely, would never have been planted by anybody. It's two stems that have grown together. So the only tree that you could really say this was planted would be the Norway maple, because it's not native to right here. And it's right in front of the door, the meeting house front door. And I suspect that it was a memorial tree. But the rest of the trees are, you know, they're not Arnold Arboretum type trees. They're pretty ragged. So it was, a lot of what we're doing is safety. You know, a lot of them are dead, dropping limbs. But this will really, this work will go a long way to straightening all that out. As the cemetery commission last night, they said, now we gotta do the same thing at all the other cemeteries. This is just the start of the process.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing here none, if someone wants to make that motion, as I suggested, it's a motion requested from the select board.
I move to approve a contract with Arbifine for $11,250 for work at the Rockingham Meeting House as detailed in the Rockingham Meeting House tree trimming, cabling, and removal list.
We have a second.
A second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the motion to Arbor-Klein for $11,250 for work at the Rockingham Meeting House as detailed in the listing of the tree trimming, cabling, and removal list. Any further discussion? Hearing seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries, Jim. You're all set. Thank you for coming down. Okay, let's move on to review and adopt social services levy for the warning. There is information in your packet. So, if you want to go to this sheet here, it's a 5-year review request for FY25 warning. It's the listing from the review committee. Should be in there.
This is.
Everybody got that? I have some suggestions. I'll read them and we can go from there. The area senior center was, by the committee, reduced it to 15,000. We got a lot of phone calls with people all bent out of shape about that situation. I did get a chance to talk to Deegan at the center today, and I figured that they were looking for a $1,782 increase. So I suggested we would level fund them at the $23,166. Is everybody all set with that one?
That's the new request.
That's right.
I agree with that.
Actually, it should be no, let me rephrase that. We're gonna go to 21,384. The 23,166 is with the $1,782 increase in that. So we will be going back to that one.
So the current funded amount, level funded.
Correct. Okay, let's go to the BF Community Bike. I am suggesting we reduce that one to $3,500 based on the fact that they do not approach other towns for funding. And they do service other towns. They do sell information, their services. So I don't know how anybody feels about that. Of course, it could change the town meeting, but that was my suggestion. Any comments? Rick?
She's about to buy that building, I don't know if you know it, she's going through Bonnie's going through a big fundraising campaign. So this is a year where they really need their, every penny. And she's also providing tremendous service for youngsters in this town. I don't know if other people feel that way, but I regard Bonnie as a kind of a superstar delivering social services. Any other thoughts?
And I still think the majority of the people are Bellows Falls residents, even though she does.
Well, the numbers kind of looked a little funky to me. They said they have 30,000 services. They do entertain customers, 3,000 customers. I find that hard to believe because every time I've gone by there, I've never seen it open and I've never seen a huge number of people flocking around there unless they have some special event going on where they're gonna do bike stuff, whatever. But they did say that Rockingham, does take 1,500. So it's half of what they're servicing. So based on those numbers, that, you know, we could have done half of it, but I didn't think that was fair. I just thought that there was a note on Debbie's, sheets that they are gonna, in the future, gonna go out looking, knocking on doors in other towns that they're servicing.
Yeah, she was
So-
Westminster.
So, don't forget, this is next year's money, so.
Right.
So I guess I'd like to make some comments. I was the president of the bike project for a number of years. But I think there are definitely 3,000 people make use of it, customers or whatever you call it. People are in and out of there all the time. I think this is a bad idea to cut their funding. I really do. I know how hard they work. Personally, I think we could trim a little funding in some other areas if we really want to.
So what's the consensus of the board so that we can get a number into the budget as a placeholder? You wanna do,
I'm inclined towards the level funding.
Yeah, same here.
Okay.
okay? Then,
I just have a question before we keep going on. In this policy, where it talks about the beginning with the March 2019 town meeting,
mhm.
the last sentence says the amount of the appropriation indicated in the warning article will be the same as that amount approved at the previous town meeting. So are we even able to make these changes? Because this is the 5-year review,
Right,
but it states that its amount needs to be the same.
well, it's, you know, I'm just going by what the committee recommended, or I recommend anyway, not the committee. The committee is recommending level fund it. But there are some of these that are asking for an increase, and
And if they ask for an increase, wouldn't they have to submit a
they're
petition?
supposed to submit a petition, or I haven't seen one. I don't think, Deb, did you ever see a petition or any of those that, like, social services, senior solutions? Or
No,
Pass Plates?
No, we never saw petitions. You got all the material we have. That was not part of it.
Okay.
But they don't have to submit the petitions until January, correct?
I think so, right, to the town
I
clerk?
mean, they have to request by that date, but they don't have to submit a petition until January. So,
So our draft warning has to be done by the 19th in order to meet the 45-day publishing window for
right,
the March 5th town meeting day votes. So
so they have to have their petition in by that date.
the exact dates, and again, I don't know exactly when they have
I
to.
It says
I-
something like 74 days, what it does say in here.
I know there's, and they're
So
weird.
that's January, I think, because,
It does say in that policy, I forget where.
On our
it was.
policy?
So January
Yeah,
16th
47
was
days.
45 days.
47 days before the date of the annual meeting, if they want to increase their amount.
Right.
So any of these people asking to increase the amount have to submit a petition.
By the 19th, by the time
By
the
the
board
19th.
votes on the final warning.
And because this is the 5th year, according to the policy, they just they're voted on individually. But it says here that the warning has to say it's the same amount. So I'm just not sure whether we're even allowed to change it. I'm saying,
Well, I
I don't
think-
know.
We
According to
put
the
it on the
policy.
warning for the same amount that it was, but,
Last year,
but if they are requesting an increase,
they need a petition.
They have to,
they can stand up, like they've done in the past, they stand up at town meeting and have a petition with signs and, you know.
Right,
But-
but what I'm saying is for our warning, maybe I'm wrong the way I'm reading it, but according to what this says, every 5 years, they have to be voted individually. And then it says, the amount of the appropriation indicated in the warning article will be the same as that amount approved at the previous meeting.
so we can't reduce it?
So, I don't know, I think, the way I read it, you can't reduce it, you can't increase it. I don't know if you can reduce it. It just says will be the same amount, so that to me sounds like you have to leave it level funded.
So people could go on for years and years and we still have to keep giving them money?
Well, the town votes, yeah. So every 5 years, the town residents can say, no, we will approve this.
So this is this year. We have to
Yeah.
make a recommendation though. We can alter our recommendation. The voters don't have to approve it.
Yeah, but I don't know if the warning, we can
What
change the
what
amount on
she's
the
saying
warning,
is the
is what I'm
warning
saying.
list that's gonna be put out there, every warning article has to be the same as what they had last year. Even if they reduce, or we want to recommend that we reduce, we can make that motion or make that argument at the point when that particular item comes up on the agenda, on the warning.
Yeah, and the voters can decide to either say, no, you're getting
They
nothing,
may say get nothing.
or they can say, you get twice the amount. But what, for us, legally, for what we can put on the warning, it sounds to me by that paragraph is we have to put on what was there the last time.
Then why do we do this whole study?
So that we can give the information to the voters on town meeting day.
Yeah,
That's a lot of information.
So in the warning, we have to just put this out, level funded for everybody, that's the
Right.
warning.
from
But
last
that-
year, yeah.
From
Yeah.
what it was last year.
The
But
total,
then we can have articles on the warrant where we go down each one.
every one of them's gonna be on there, that's right.
Everyone will be, so everyone will be an article, and which every article, we can say, the select board suggests that we give blah,
Right.
blah, blah,
That's exactly right.
and then the people
You'll
vote.
probably have two separate recommendations, right? You'll have the Social Services Agency Committee's recommendations, right? That's one set that you've already accepted. And then you'll have your recommendations, whatever you decide, if they're the same or different. And then there'll be a chance, I guess, on the floor for voters to decide, right?
Right.
There's, leave it alone, increase it,
Right.
do your, choose between your
Recommendations.
Yeah, I
recommendations.
remember some years ago when we went through each one.
Right.
So what we're doing right now is figuring out what our recommendation is.
Right,
Yes.
basically,
I get it.
that's what we're doing.
But yeah, we can't change that on
No,
the
no,
warning.
so.
Unless
what
they
will-
petition, and then that warning will be.
So as I say, what will go in on the warning will be the 94,603 column.
Correct.
So,
But you'll have two reports that'll be handed out to people
right,
with the committee's recommendation and whatever you decide, if it's separate or different.
And then it's up to the voters.
And then it's
Yeah.
up to people at the,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I just want to make that clear, so people don't think the select board is cutting all of this. I
No,
mean,
right.
it's the voters who actually make that decision.
correct.
Right, okay.
That's what I explained to the senior center today.
And I think Jamie has a question, if you have a,
Yeah, just as a voter, so the article would read, whatever organization is, requesting the original amount of 1,500, right? Or the original funded amount was 1,500. However, the committee and the board have reviewed this and want this, and then that organization has requested this, and then we vote from the floor. Would it have that in the article of those different scenarios? So this is what it's been funded for 5 years. This is what they're requesting. This is what the committee and the board have reviewed and suggest. Just so the voter knows that, hey, this is what it was level funded at and what we agreed to last time. This is what they're requesting now, and this is what we recommend.
How it's probably gonna work is that the warning will have the original item on there, the level funded amount from last year. And then whoever reads that motion to ask for the amount of money will then make the alternate suggestion either to increase or reduce according to both the committee and the board's recommendation. And then the vote will take from there. Then the discussion opens up.
Yeah, but
Okay.
if they did put in a petition, the warning will say what the petition agreed
Right.
on, yes.
Petition amount, yeah, the warning will say petition amount of blah, blah, whatever they happen to ask for.
So those organizations, we should have good attendance this year if they want their increases, because they're going to have to lobby on the floor to why they want that increase, right? So those organizations, Sue, you brought up a great point, and I appreciate that. So the organization should know about the petition in 5 years, and if you want more funding, you should show up at the floor, right? So thank you very much for that.
Jamie, while I still have you, the process is gonna be, once we get done tonight, the letter will go out to each and every one of these people explaining just what you said.
Okay, great. Good
So
stuff. Thank you.
they'll have notice by the end of the week probably, or the first of next. So plenty of time for them to get their organization together.
Great stuff.
Okay, so do we want to continue making our recommendations, or do we want to just stop at this point?
I have one recommendation change I'd like to discuss. So the visiting nurses of Vermont, New Hampshire, Deb Wright did some really fabulous research, found their 990, and their two top executives, Amy Claiborne makes $469,000 a year with $60,000 in benefits for a total of $529,000, 624. Their next most highly paid person makes $423,728 with $16,000 in benefits. That comes to $439,734. These top two people make close to $1 million a year, $969,000. I'm not comfortable with the voters of Rockingham contributing to such excessive compensation at a social service agency. And you may well remember a few years ago that Judith Hayward of HCRS got her board to vote her a $650,000 retirement present. So we have to keep them, social service agencies have to be looked on like you have deserved monitoring.
Yeah.
So I don't, it just seems that here we are with these little organizations like the Bellas Falls Bike Project, and people are making no money, and then we're giving money to these people who pay themselves these incredible salaries. It just doesn't feel right.
Well, the committee has reduced, has suggested a reduction of 15,000, and to further your comments, I did go and check with the director of Vermont Visiting Nurse, and he confirmed what Debbie had told me on the phone, that Johnson Wright had gotten information that they have reduced services to the Rockingham area. They're doing very limited home health services, and they do little or no hospice service. He confirmed that, and he said they're just kind of spread thin. Since COVID hit them, they lost a lot of staff, and they haven't been able to fill those positions, and that's why they're not providing the service they used to provide.
They would have paid staff a little more, and maybe they could get staff.
Did they say, they said little or none, but did they give any numbers? They have the numbers. Did they give numbers? What does that mean, like 1 or 2 or 10 or?
No, they didn't give me any numbers, but we do have some of the numbers and the information. I'm not sure if I put it on that other list that you have.
Of how many people?
That one there.
There's an organization called Bayada. My wife just had a knee replacement. And Bayada's delivering most of the services around here now. And when I asked the Bayada representative if visiting nurses does anything in Rockingham, she said, no. So I just don't know why we would be supporting.
Well, that's a suggestion that when that article comes up, we can make that argument at that point.
All right.
Well, Rick, what, they said there's no, I mean, I just had a stroke in October, and I had 3 different nurses coming to see me,
Oh, from which organization?
visiting nurses.
Really, because Bayada, this one told me that Bayada covers Rockingham now.
That must have been fairly recent then.
Must have.
Oh, well, okay.
Anyway, I don't know.
So, anyway. Now,
There's an awful lot of duplication of services.
yes, well, the intent here is that BF Community Bike is not a community service by definition from state statute. There's a copy of the statute in your paperwork. The service they deliver don't qualify. They don't give aid to, people.
Doesn't
They
it
don't
count as
give food stuff.
transportation? Does it not?
Transportation is kind of a gray area. Transportation, yes, they provide bicycles, but they don't take people on the bicycles and take them where you're going. If you got a bike, you ride the bike. They don't have someone else. They did have at one point a 2-seater bike that they used to take some of the seniors around that couldn't get around. I know that a couple of people would peddle them around town just to get them around, but that's, you know, that's the case, so. So we will be moving them to a new entitlement called community funding, which is, that's where they'll end up being put into, that category, and removed from the social service once we go through the process of voting. So they won't show up in the next year under social services, they'll be under community funding. Fact TV is now listed as professional services, and that's where they're gonna stay. So they were not reviewed by the committee. We had a meeting with Scott this morning as to what they were going originally. I saw someplace where they had an email, I think, they were requesting $3,200 increase from the 1,800, they want $5,000. We talked to Alex Stradling, who's the main figure of that organization, and had a long discussion about all our communication activities, and they're going to be trying to improve that and get set up for a town meeting. And after our discussion, again, he decided that they would settle for $2,500. So that's what we're gonna try and throw on the table. That one is not voted on, it's in the budget. So unless someone has a problem with that, because they're gonna go back to the mic system we had here instead of these things that, you know, half people can't hear them anyway. And so, but they're gonna try and improve the whole audio system upstairs, so people talk, you're not gonna get that screeching sound going through your ears and make your eyes cross and all that. So they're gonna move on doing that, so. And they get no funding from anybody else. What they do is they do provide, like in Westminster, they have the owls down there, but they provide a guy to set the whole system up for them, and then the guy stays there and does the filming. We don't have that here. We got the owls, but we don't have anybody filming. So it's just basically not live unless you're on Zoom. And then you can watch 2 or 3 days later, you can go back up on Fact TV and watch the meeting if you missed it. And the interesting thing, when the email he came down, he said that there were between 50 and 100 hits on people viewing meetings, which goes back to the survey situation of trying to attract people. Even if that many people don't watch the Fact TV, the meetings on Fact TV, so it's gonna be interesting to see where the survey ends up, that's what I'm saying.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
So, that means our municipal manager won't have to do tech support for these.
That was the long part of the conversation.
It's always been a hassle for you, I'm trying to figure out if this is a good thing for
We
you.
want a permanent solution down here that
Yeah.
we can move around so that, you know, when this
Right.
room is
Like we just did
multi-purpose.
today?
So like today,
Right.
when we came in, everything was all disconnected and just a pile of rat nests over there with everything just piled up. And I don't know who used the room last, but he disconnected everything, and thank God, listen to who everything, and Scott knew everything was supposed to go, and it worked, so.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we'll have a plug and play system hopefully in place that's, you know, all they gotta do is just, somebody wants to use the room, okay, you can move stuff, but we'll be able to put together without too much hassle.
And then trying to work out, since we're gonna have the main town, informational meeting upstairs, to make sure that the audio up there is appropriate with microphones, and so we didn't have all the feedback and some of the other problems we were having
That's good.
previously.
And we've had some meetings that have been delayed by 25 or 30 minutes while we hassled tech
Yep.
stuff, so that won't be happening again.
That's the goal, is to get that fixed. When will that happen, Rick?
Anyway, I'm encouraged.
In the
that-
undefined near future, but we're excited.
Good.
to get
Okay,
there.
moving along, we got Greater Falls Connections, the notes that were on Debbie's.
Do you need, I think we have a question, another.
Hey, just before, I'm sorry, Peter, but I didn't have this many questions, but you keep talking and it keeps raising questions. So on Fact TV, you're stating that the $2,500 that you guys are gonna put in the budget, they don't request funding from any other organization?
That is correct.
Grafton, nobody?
They don't request it even from the school districts. What they do is they provide the service, but then if there's a situation, like I said, Westminster uses the owls like we do here, but they supply a person to go down there and set the whole system up for them. And he's there during the whole meeting, so if there's an issue, he's right there to correct it. We don't have that here. And what they do is they bill them for the time the guy's down there.
Right, and now they're expanding into Keene and everything else, so to say that they don't get any funding anywhere else isn't quite accurate, right? I mean, they are getting funding from other sources, so
That
whether
is
it's a,
correct.
okay, all right, thank you.
That is correct.
They get paid for their services
They get
that they
paid for the
provide,
services.
but they don't get any like
but
free
what they-
donation
what-
money.
Like they do, they come here and they've asked for the money. I mean, as far as I can remember, I've been on this board for 15 years, and that, it used to be $1,500, like, somebody can correct me. And for some reason or other, somewhere along the line, it got raised to 1,800. And that's when
Right,
they
but-
came and asked for the money.
It was a per
But,
meeting.
right, but we used to have people at the meeting, Stan Davis and the like, when they were first starting up. So basically that $2,500 is we're paying for equipment.
Basically, yeah, well, he's gonna come up with 3 different scenarios of how we can work things together, so, this money is not available to him until next July anyway, so he's aware of that.
Right,
So
okay.
essentially, moving to a similar system to what other towns are using with them, paying them for services rather than having a social services appropriation. Would that be correct?
We've never.
Well, they're not a social service.
They've always been a contract item. I think
Okay.
what he needs support with is a couple things. He's doing a dedicated channel so that all of the public service programming is available on their dedicated channel. So that's for every community. That's why he's going to other communities and asking them to help support that as well.
Right.
And then there'll be a link and the ability to go through and do digital archives and go backwards and find all the information. So that's what he's building for the longer term, to help support the public access mission. So,
And I think it's important to remember too, that our media coverage, our newspaper coverage, Susan and other people, Susan Small here, watch these meetings through that to get their TV, their written coverage, their press coverage. I know that the Vermont Shopper also does that. And so that's a key way of getting getting the work we do out there to our constituents. So we have to keep that in mind.
No, understood. I'm not against it. I just wanted clarity. And what's our Zoom subscription per year for these meetings?
It's a month and I can't remember.
Gonna have to defer to Alyssa, she's trying to figure it out.
It's
No,
like maybe
it's-
3, it
it's
was like
something
mine, it's
like-
like 300 or something? I
Yeah,
can't remember, it's
It's
not
not a
huge.
ton per year.
No, understand, but from a town standpoint and village as well, I mean, Scott records each meeting, so, we have that archive as well. And I'm not against Fact TV. I think they do a great job, but just wanted clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, nope, that's fine, that's what we're here for. All right, let's move on to Greater Falls Connections. The item on the warning will read 4,000. I am suggesting we make the argument to reduce to 2,000. Simply that they do not counteract or interact with the students like they were doing prior. They are now pretty much of a pamphlet organization. They hand out pamphlets, do meetings, but they do not go one-on-one with the students like they used to. The high school was funding them to 25,000, and they dropped it to 7,000. So I feel we're justified in making the argument to reduce that amount.
I think you have some questions, Peter?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ginger Driscoll. I'm the prevention specialist with Greater Falls Connections. Just to keep you updated, today I was at the middle school with the tobacco prevention group of students, and I was at the high school with the tobacco prevention group of students, and I'll be joining them on field trips this year. And there's also been some interest on some more one-on-ones. So while there was a dip in services, I believe that we are re-engaging to what you were describing as previous, and it'd be really helpful to not lose funding while we're trying to re-engage.
So let me ask you the question, why did the school drop you $18,000 funding?
I'm not sure. And I think that that's even in flux. So I'm the prevention specialist and not the director or anything. I have limited views, and I also have been in this position since May. So anything that's happened before May, I can't give you a lot of information on, but I could, if you'd like, reach out and see if I could get that to you all in the future.
Okay, no problem. Greater Falls Justice Center, Green Mountain RSVP, HCRS, Meeting Water YMCA, Our Place, Drop-In Center, requesting level funding, and I have no opposition to those. Park Place is looking, they had 4,000, looking for $1,000 increase. I suggest we level fund them. Their services are, I think a third of the people they service are from Rockingham, the rest of them from other areas, and I don't know if there's any other outfit that, a couple of towns do support them, but not to the level Rockingham does. Senior Solutions is coming up, they want $4,200 from $1,500 to $2,700 increase. I kind of debated on that one myself. I thought maybe a 25, give them $1,000 versus the 2,700, but it'll all end up at the town. Sefco's level funded. The mover is looking for $375 extra, which is a pittance. I didn't have an, I didn't know somebody else had done a situation with that one. Springfield Supported Housing, they're looking to level fund. Visiting nurses, we've already discussed that in detail. And the rest of them, adult learning, Women's Freedom Center, and youth services are all looking for level funding. So, that being said, anybody got any comments?
Yep, so I do. So I did a little calculation about residents in the town divided by how much, or how much we give them, each town give them divided by residents of the town. So Sevka, for example, is right down the line, 99 cents a resident. They must have a formula where they do that. This Springfield Supported Housing, we give them 51 cents per resident. Springfield itself only gives them 55 cents. I wonder how something in Springfield, and I guess we talked about this before, I'm not clear on how something in Springfield helps Rockingham residents and why we do that.
Well, it's on the sheet, they help aid in getting low-income housing, people situated, if they lose their home, they help them find alternative housing and stuff. It's sort of what can't think of the word, the person that we had, social services person that we had, that was in our budget for $1,500, $500 or something like that, that they would go out and put them up in motels and things like that. I think that's what they're taking over. I'm not positive, but.
All right, and do they have an office here in Rockingham?
No.
So people are people who are having housing insecurity have to go to Springfield to get this service?
I think they work out of Park Place.
It says right here they work.
Yeah, work out of Park Place.
So they must have some, I think there's somebody who comes certain days a week.
Yeah.
Right, and Ginger, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so our offices are in Parks Place, and they do have somebody that comes once a week, like a lot of other services. Rockingham has this very special problem of being covered by agencies that are south or north of us. And that's one of the beautiful things about Parks Place, which I don't work for, but I'm a big fan of, is that it does allow services for our Rockingham residents, even though the organizations are based outside of Rockingham.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're all set with this section of this item on the agenda. So Melissa will put it in the warning and stuff as level funded, and then we'll make the argument at the point off the warning.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, which is also why Parks Place, where it says in here admin is 28% of the budget, is because they bring in these other agencies. They kind of are like provide the overhead and other expenses, so their admin would go up because they can't program that to services, because they themselves are not providing the
This
services.
is interesting. I think the notice I saw in the notes there was that the biggest thing to do is a diaper bank. People need diapers, so, yeah. But anyway, okay, let's move on to the full.
Peter, one more thing. So level funded for these projects, what is that number that will be on the warning and what is the requested amounts?
94,603 is the amount that's gonna show up on the, budget, on the agenda, and if, the increased amount will be $100,460.
What?
If we
No.
grant the increases, right?
If everybody goes with,
If they petition for the increase, they
Right.
have to
Right.
petition.
No, understood. Thank you.
either way, Jamie.
By the time they petition, they could petition for a different amount.
They could.
They may not
Good.
petition
Yeah.
at all.
Right.
Yeah.
They may not even show up, so there again, that's what has happened in the past, they do not show to make their argument, so. As Jamie said, if they want the money, they should be showing up, but that's where that goes. Okay, let's, there's a thick packet there of, it's a budget run, so. Alyssa, Scott, and I have been over my issue, so
So a couple highlights, off our proposed schedule, we're not doing too badly, we're probably off a little bit. We hope to have a final budget adoption and warning on the 2nd, but obviously we'll have that 2 weeks after that, so we'll be looking for that on the 16th. That still puts you within your 45-day required window for the March 5th town meeting, so you're good there. Some just general conversations about large numbers and sort of things that were impacting our overall budget after we've gone through our individual reports, as well as some of the other discussions that we've had. The biggest challenge to this budget was that, last year we took 200,000 from fund balance and started off the year with that as a way for us to decrease our amount to be raised by taxes. So we, this year, don't have that luxury. So we were starting with that as an immediate challenge to make sure that we were not able to use that for this year's budget. Contracts for our settled union contracts mandated a 6% increase in wages. So that's built into all of your numbers. And then the benefits costs raised, the state of Vermont Insurance Board raised our Blue Cross Blue Shield by 13%. So that impacted your budget. However, it was not all bad news in the budget, so to speak. Some things actually decreased in cost, and one of the major ones was our workers' comp insurance rates, because we've had some, it's based on experience ratings, and so we've had some large claims now that have aged out, as well as some other just improvements in the rate that they were charging us. There was actually a decrease in the rate they were charging us on our base, as well as a decrease based on our experience modification. So that's why we saw some significant savings in our workers' comp when you look at year to year. So that was a nice surprise, and again, we've been working on safety and other programs, and workers' comp is one of those things you hope you don't have to use, but unfortunately, due to the nature of some of this work, we occasionally have injuries and surgeries and things that are expensive, and that's where you see that fluctuate over time. But right now, we're in a good place with that, and we hope that trend is going to continue. We asked all of our departments to level fund, so we were not adding any new programs, we were not adding any new staff. We were anticipating that we would be operating pretty much within the current levels of service, and I think the board was pretty consistent that that was a message that they were also comfortable with. Bigger issues that we still are working through with our commitment to paving. You'll see that when you look at some of the larger numbers that we get into, our annual appropriation for paving is slightly lower than last year's, but we're also applying for that transportation alternatives funding for that large project around School and Atkinson Street and Church Place, which includes sidewalks and paving. So actually, your total commitment, and those funds, I think we have to apply by March. Those funds would actually be over $1 million in new work for next year. So you would actually see an increase in the amount of work we're actually doing, as opposed to a decrease. So I think that's, again, continuing the board's commitment to maintaining and improving our roads and our sidewalks. And then on the major capital things like our equipment funds and maintaining some of the commitments we've made to some of our historic structures. Gary put in a very detailed report, and you can see with all of his various funding commitments based on multiple funders, and each funder has multiple requirements for him to meet in order to be able to access his funding. We're trying to really hit some of those milestones for the process of getting the building, getting the initial phase of the cleanup started, and then really engaging in the major monies, which is the $1.8 million in the Chrissy funds, which is the bulk of the work that needs to get done in that building. Gary spent a lot of time on this and has done a lot of ping-ponging between various agencies and their requirements and what they would accept, and whether one NEPA is not accepted by another group, so we'd have to do a supplemental, all these different things. But I think he has a good critical path to get that work done. And we feel pretty good right now. We're in the final stages of the lease. So we're hopeful that we can bring to you on January 2nd the initial purchase option, so that we can kick off that 6-month window, so that then we're able to have a closing within that 6-month period and actually take ownership. There's a couple of key items in January that need to happen with some NEPA acceptances and some other funder requirements, but we feel pretty confident that we're at that point now, or that project will really start to take shape. The major project here, and if you walk upstairs and look at the ceilings, you realize that our roof has been leaking at an amazing rate, and with all the rain that we've had, it's making it even more difficult. But we did finally have our site visit with the funding agency. They led us to believe that we're in pretty good shape to get the full recommendation, which would be the $500,000 grant. And we've also reached out to contractors that would provide that type of rolled rubber insulated roofing, as well as the associated drainage improvements, and their numbers are right around $500,000 to $510,000 to actually do the work. So if we get that notice to proceed, we feel pretty good that that will fix our roofing problems, and then we'll be able to then really finish the outside portions of this building, which are still needing to be completed, and that's finalizing the windows and then the brick pointing. And then this building, at least from an envelope standpoint, will be watertight and in pretty good shape. So we feel pretty good about that as well. And then our equipment acquisition, I've recommended that we look at some funding options, and there's an item on your agenda for later to apply for some state money. They have a 2% capital equipment program, which is a nice subsidized rate based on just talking to some of the banks here locally about it. They were looking at a 5-year municipal loan. What would the rates be? And right now they're at about 6% on the municipal side. So if you look out and you follow the financial prognosticators, everybody seems to be thinking that next year you might see some rate declines, and that we might see some rate cuts. And if that's the case, then the numbers that I'm looking at would at least decrease. So this year, in this current budget, we have 2 items that are coming off of our long-term equipment schedule. That's why you see a slight increase in our payments for next year's proposed budget. But that $195,000, then those 2 items are paid for. And if we do the $110,000, which is the max under the capital equipment fund, and then the $170,000, which is the balance of the loader, another $150 for Gary's train station, which I've named it now, it's Gary's train station.
Fox train station.
Yeah. Town hall, and then another $125 for the meeting house to help them with some of their phasing, and we'll talk about that here in more detail in a minute. That's roughly gonna be about $135,000 a year on a 5-year payback for that $570,000 proposed borrowing. And then the $110,000 at 2% is roughly $25,000 a year. So you'd actually see a decrease in your year-to-year borrowing costs if you decided to go that route and fund those items as we go forward. On the meeting house, we've been meeting with some of the professionals. We have an owner's agent who's working with us, putting together our bid packages for the first phase, which we've talked about. very intense project, lots of moving parts, and literally moving parts, where they're talking about picking up the building and moving it. And then doing all this excavation and work under the existing building foundation, and then lifting the building back up once they do the timber frame repairs and sticking it back on this new foundation. It's been done other places. It's very intensive work, but looking at some of the cost estimates, I think he's still a little light. He's gonna have to take some of this money that we've already allocated previously through ARPA and the Save America's Treasures Grant, leverage this additional borrowing. We think that feels pretty good to get him through the first phase of this project. He just got awarded a grant to help match the roof work that needs to be done out there, so he's gonna get a 50% match on that. That's, I think, an $11,000 grant, I think, something in that neighborhood. So that was good news. And then pulling the windows out of the first phase and pushing the windows and the interior work into a second phase, then applying for a National Park Service grant, which is due in March, which we're still arguing about how much. The max you can apply for is $750,000. And we did the rough math on what we might need for these next pieces, the windows and all the interior work with the woodwork, the plaster work, some of the floor restoration work. He probably is gonna need about another $675,000 to get that work done. The good news with the National Park Service grant, it does not require a match. So we're hopeful that we can engage some of our federal officials and other folks to help push and see if that's possible to get that funded. And then that would push that project to a good place and not have to then require any additional funding from us, which sets us all up, once we get through this budget, to really start looking forward into our 25, 26, and into those years when we're starting to talk about bridge expenses. We'll be into the depot by then. We'll very preliminarily be into the Vilas portion. Probably in 27, 28, we'll start into the design and preliminary work there. So there's still large capital out there that we're still gonna have to transition into. But I think you're in pretty good shape to be able to handle some of those costs. And then you'll see that, by even with this additional borrowing, your long-term borrowing payments are continuing to go down. The biggest one is on this building itself, the 20-year bond that did the $1 million worth of work. Finally, I think our last payment is November of 25, I believe, for that.
So,
And that's what, 140,000?
140, I think,
Yeah.
plus interest.
Right. So you'll start to see that you've got some capability there. If you have to go back out and borrow for the local shares on some of these other projects, you'll have some capacity to do
It's
that.
actually 26.
I'm sorry, so 26. So you're set up in a pretty good place. This is a fairly conservative budget. As we said, there are no new programs being discussed or any major changes. We can certainly go back through the numbers, just the preliminary numbers. If you look at that first page, and Alyssa sort of highlighted in pink what the initial look at is to be raised by taxes. And this proposed budget round is about $2,555,148. Compare that to last year, we had asked for $2,452,407. So a year-to-year increase at this point, and again, it's still not final, would put you roughly, what, 102,000 from year-to-year increase.
So Scott, that's only a 4% increase in tax revenue. It comes out to something like $13,000 and $12,741. How, given what our auditor told us at that meeting, what was it, about a month ago, where he said we have to either tighten our belt or get more revenue, or maybe both. Does that small of an increase in our tax revenue, is that gonna cut it?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, it rebuilds our capital equipment account. I think we're hopeful to trend positively this year. Last year, we consciously, the board made conscious decisions based on equipment acquisition, to spend more money than we had initially thought we would. So we're not doing that this year. Alyssa's told me no a lot.
Well,
So
you're also, no.
No, see, she said no again.
No.
I get this every day.
So Ron, when he was here, he said that we cannot continue to subsidize with our fund balance.
Right.
That was his concern.
Correct. That's that
Yes.
$200,000.
And that's
transfer
why
to-
we
to
didn't
reduce the
do
tax
it.
rate.
So last year, we put in 100,000 from the general fund. This year, we did not, and yet we only increased taxes by that 100,000.
Right.
So
That's the proposal.
that's not, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah, okay,
And
that's,
the other unknown, which will impact the tax rate, which we won't know until the listers are done with their work, is where we are with the grand list.
Right.
All their indications right now are that the grand list will actually be increasing, which is beneficial to your tax rate. You'll actually see a lower tax rate based on that.
good.
So those are all positive factors.
I mean, because we have this 27 units, those are taxed,
Got a tiny bit.
right?
But that, add the limited, Gary, on the tax on the Wyndham with the Bells Falls garage. Isn't the value capped or something, or?
It's taxed on the
I don't
leases,
know,
and the
I think-
leases are a little below market, so it doesn't generate
Right.
as
But it's
much.
taxed on the leases.
Yeah.
Right. It's
But
not
I mean,
taxed,
it's tax that we didn't have from
right,
last
it's
year.
not
Right,
taxed on
right,
that
yeah.
full
Yeah.
value of construction, right?
Right.
People think there's $9 million. we're gonna
No,
get.
I know, but
mean,
it's
that's
new
one,
housing
sure,
on the
it'd be nice,
budget.
but-
It is contributing to the
Right.
tax rate. It is a tax,
Right.
right, it is a tax positive location for sure. So that's sort of the 10,000-foot view. In all seriousness, I do appreciate Alyssa's patience, because
You should have been at the meeting this morning. It was fun.
I've never been scared to say no, but I say a lot to him. He doesn't listen, though.
Well,
Yeah.
true point.
anyway, so I feel pretty good about, the work that went into that and sort of the underpinnings of what we're trying to do here. I realize that there's always more in terms of need and in terms of wants than there is in relationship to how much the community can afford, right? And that's always the tough balancing act that you guys ultimately have to make a decision on. So I appreciate that aspect of it as well.
So just to be the devil's advocate, if we don't get that grant for the town hall roof, what's our plan there? We're gonna probably look at borrowing for that too? I mean, we gotta do something. We can't continue to let this roof.
There are other funds, other types of funding available for energy efficiency and CDBG monies for that. So I would do that, Peter, before I would just do a
Yeah,
pure
no,
borrowing.
I know we talked about it before. I just wanna let the board get updated on what
There
the,
are alternatives, but they're certainly not as beneficial as
Yeah.
the MERP money, for sure.
does anybody have any questions on the budget run?
I think we have a Jamie nodding.
I actually had it backwards, too.
Jamie's got his hand up again. It wasn't me talking this time, Jamie.
Hey, so if you guys don't mind, I mean, we're talking $100,000 here, $100,000 here. Can we go back to the $150,000 for Gary's train station and, specifically speak to what that's going to?
Yes. So on the next phase of the train station, so we have money from Northern Borders and taxpayer money for the actual purchase and acquisition. The next phase that it unlocks, once we do that, it unlocks a $300,000 Wyndham Regional funding source for all the cleanup of all of the contamination on that site. And then there's an additional $275,000 of exterior improvements that we need to pay for. The downtown, the downtown improvement fund, the DTF, is gonna fund roughly 75,000 of that. But we need that extra 150,000 to do some additional work, which will help with that phase. And then ultimately, the third phase, Jamie, is the $1.8 million, which is the Chrissy grant, which is the large money for the build out of the interior spaces, the leasable spaces, and then there'll have to be some tax credit and other layers on that portion of the phasing in order for the building to be up and fully operational. I mean,
Okay,
that's a-
so, all right, so now that we're down to the 100-foot level, we'll go down to ground level here. So The original study for the purchase of this was done in July of 2004 and noted under H, page 20, was about hazardous materials. And all that was really found was the asbestos on the pipes in the basement and menial stuff. And that was under the assumption there was going to be no ground disturbances. So then in March of 2020, just prior to the meeting, and we approved $75,000 to match, the first draft of this whole plan and proposal was to fund $50,000 for cleanup for hazmat, along with $35,000 for professional fees dealing with hazardous material. So it was highly questioned either January or February before we voted on this, when that company was here and proposing that. And I said, subject taxpayer, was raising my hand, talking about Brownsfield cleanup and everything. And I was assured, oh, don't worry, we're only going 6 or 7 inches around the building. It won't be an issue and it's not going to cost us anymore. But now I hear that it's costing us another additional $150,000 for cleanup that we weren't aware of?
No, no. I think Gary can help you with that, Jamie, but no, that's not where that money's going.
Yeah, so the 2004, that study in categorical exclusion, this, the current project uses none of those assumptions. Conditions are a lot different, thresholds for contamination are different. The at town meeting, what we voted on included none of the cleanup. So that was to add $75,000 of town funds to the acquisition of the station, which is $125,000 from a downtown transportation fund and $50,000 from the ARPA. The brownfield, all of the cleanup is in the building. There's no cleanup at all that we're doing on the external portions. So all of the asbestos is in the plaster and on the pipes. There's some lead paint. And so that $300,000 is part of Wyndham Regional Brownfields Program funding. $240,000 is grant, $60,000 is loan. And the EnviroVantage that will be doing the work thought they could come in, I don't know, maybe $275,000. So the loan portion will likely be a lot less than the $60,000. But that's all Wyndham Regional Commission funding. The town funding that we voted on, the $75,000, is strictly acquisition, as we listed in the article on the warning. This $150,000 debt, we're getting towards the end of the project. So the Chrissy grant, which is through a $1.8 million earmark, has a $350,000 match portion. And so we're matching that with some ARPA funds and with this debt. But at no point is this $150,000 for the brownfields cleanup that we're looking at in this second phase, which will start as soon as we own the building in July.
Right, but it clearly said it was for cleanup of the site, Brownsfield or not. So in the first draft that is posted on the town website, in that first draft, it included $50K for hazmat and $35K for professional fees regarding hazardous material waste. Also, an email or a file that you wrote that's also posted from October 26th of 2021, existing conditions, purchase and renovation of the building, station, lease the land around the station from VTrans, Rail Property Division, State of Vermont. There are issues and liability around potential contamination and soil disturbance in the land owned by the state around the station. Their position, the biggest liability related to the land area around the station and minimizing any disturbance to the soils. Our understanding is that you would use the parking lot, which is already paved and leased by V-Trans to the town, the disturbance we discussed when we talked regarding the installation of lighting, which is hopefully could be accomplished without too much disturbance. And at the end of it, you write updates to continue as work moves on. That was 2 years ago. And we're looking at, it was clearly discussed, 3 years ago about, are we setting 75K enough to deal with everything, or are we going to come with our hand out to provide more money for this? Right. And it was more than just the original, acquisition of the property. It was discussed of what is the worst? What are we going to find here that's going to cost us money down the road? So,
Well, Jamie, I think maybe there's multiple issues on this property. And our leasing is respecting that, because if we go outside the building envelope and open up the entire site, because right now the railroad's exempt from that cleanup. But if we owned anything beyond the building envelope, we would be responsible for cleanup, and there would be a significant local cost to doing that.
and that was,
Jamie, let me finish, please,
Yep.
because maybe I can
oh,
explain.
certainly.
So part of the problem was, in the intervening years, we got a Department of Justice required ADA improvement to the station platforms, which does require soil disturbances, but is not a town project. That is a Vermont rail system project. So they're dealing with what they have to deal with that project, which will include soil disturbances and cleanup. Our goal at that time was, if they were going to put in platforms, could we run some conduit and do some things to improve the lighting? Those conversations are still ongoing. I don't know if that's going to be able to be worked out or not. So, and then we had talked about shed roofing the building, so it looked like it looked back in a different era. But we weren't able to get that done because of sight distance concerns from some of the freight haulers and some of the other users of the rail. So none of the money that we're talking about, either borrowing, ARPA, or voter direct monies, goes towards any cleanup whatsoever.
But again, it's sort of being presented as this is a discovery, and each baby step we take in the purchase and acquisition, all of a sudden this jumps out at us. I mean, ADA, who would not have thought that this has to be, handicap accessible and everything else? I mean, I get the clearance distance with the awnings and everything. I did read about that, but it just, it was the whole project, and we were going to get grant funding and matching. The cost to the town was going to be $75,000. Now we're looking at $150,000, and we haven't even signed an agreement yet. So we don't know what else we're going to run into. I just wanted to make that point because, I mean, I've been tracking this, it just, and it's disappointing that we run into all these projects. We get this grant money, and then it's nickel and dime as we move along, and these things aren't foreseen before we go forward. But thank you, guys.
One of the most complicated projects that I've been involved with, Jamie, and we're leveraging over $2.5 million worth of federal funds in order to accomplish owning this station, upgrading it, and keeping it viable so that it can continue to be an Amtrak-supported local stop, and hopefully a site that we can also have some additional vitality if we have leasable space. So,
So during that discussion, and when we're talking about leasable space,
positive to me. But again, that's a board decision, not my decision.
Right, so
I think a lot of the problem, Jamie, is that I haven't updated the document from 2021. It was a little confusing the way you were reading it. The paragraph, that was a quote from V-Trans about their concerns with liability, not anything that we were concerned with, because it's been known since 2019 that the Department of Justice was requiring Amtrak to upgrade the platform and the bathrooms for ADA. it's not anything that we missed or that we have to pay for. The state acquired Chrissy grant funds from the federal government to pay for the platform, which they have designs on and they're upgrading next year. What we were trying to do was coordinate with them and use their ground disturbance to put some posts in the ground, which we're not gonna do, but half of the things that you were describing, it's not that they weren't known, it's that they're not on our dime, and they're still not. The state is, Amtrak rather, is required to upgrade the bathrooms as well as the platforms to ADA, and they contracted with the state, with V-Trans to do it. That's why V-Trans is being called out for it. But I think you're mixing up a few of the things, like the ADA pieces are not the town's job. I do hear your concerns, and part of it is the lack of updates and the clarity of how things presented. So we will commit to improving on that. So at least you will have clear information to weigh in on. Not that your concerns aren't valid, but they're just misplaced because of the way it's presented. So we'll have that clear, so we could have a discussion that is based on the facts.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that it was confusing. However, I read it verbatim to what was in your file. Also, back to viable space, which I think is great. Back when this presentation was done, there could have been an addendum to the first draft stating ADA, or also back then we had potential lease opportunities with individuals. I believe it was from Keene, and that couldn't be disclosed yet. But so do we have a viable tenant? So when this work is done, or are we still looking now?
We can't do that. We can't do any of that work yet without owning the building. All of the federal sources see a commitment of funds before you have NEPA clearance as a choice limiting activity. So if we were to go out and secure tenants at this point, it would create problems with the federal grants we have that aren't obligated. They need to have NEPA clearance and notices to proceed first. And the station being ready is a couple of years out, and there certainly will be tenants that are covering the operating costs.
Okay, well, in the presentation, and I won't go any further tonight, but I look forward to your updates, but it was that we are looking. I understand you can't sign a lease for a building that you don't own in a property that's not ready, but it was conveyed that you had a likely candidate that was willing to take it over if everything worked out. And that was a brewery in Keene, but you couldn't name who they were and everything else. But all right, thank you, Gary and Scott. I appreciate any updates.
Absolutely.
Okay, are we all set now? Can we move on? Do we move along to the next item?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
The police services for Rockingham, that was taken out because that will be another separate petition or separate article, or what's?
Well, that's something we
How's-
could debate, because we thought we put it in there at the last rendition of this budget. It was left in there as a placeholder, but
Yeah.
then this rendition shows it's taken off, and the question became, when Jamie raised it the last time, was that, you know, it was decided, so now we're trying to get the minutes from last year's meeting from Kathleen,
I have
see
that.
what actually transpired, and if
They don't
that's
say.
what happened, is that
It
it needs to
doesn't
be
specify.
taken up again this year,
No.
then we would have to get a article on the warning, but I'll,
So I just had it open, I just closed it, and I didn't know we were gonna talk about it, but, so it does not specify in the minutes, it just says, the motion was made to see if the voters of the town of Rockingham vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,000 to fund a contract with the Wyndham County Sheriffs for the purpose of providing safety services for the town of Rockingham. $6,000 is to be raised by taxes, and that's it. So it doesn't say that we have to ask again at the meeting.
no, but I think what James referring to is in the discussion that followed on that, agenda item, that was where it was mentioned that we were gonna take it up again. I don't know that, but that's why we need to look at the Kathleen's minutes.
These are the minutes, I'm reading them. I just read them.
That's verbatim.
Doesn't say in the-
Well, I believe if you talk to Jigs, who was heavily involved in that conversation, he will agree that it was a one-time appropriation and that it was going to be revisited. Whether everything gets captured in the minutes,
But wouldn't the motion have to state that if the select board intended for it to not be, or if the select board intended for it to have to be brought back to the floor, then the motion should have stated that.
Would have been a one-year appropriation.
Right, it would have
Correct.
said, this is a one-year,
Correct.
whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and the select board can decide what they wanna put in the budget
Correct.
Right now, it's not listed as an expense.
in this current.
And the current iteration you have in front of you tonight.
Right,
Which I
but-
can put it back in if we want.
Yeah, but, yeah, we could decide to put it back in, or put it again as another
Or you could have it
article.
on the floor and have it as an article and discussion, correct? Yep.
So when will we make that decision, Susan and Peter, about, do we wanna debate it as a select board, or do we?
Well, we can debate it, or we can just put it in the budget, and then if someone brings it up, you would just refer to page such and such where it's listed under public safety, and we can discuss it at that point rather than put it on the warning.
Susan, I'm hearing from your neighbors that it's working to some degree. Is that your sense?
Yeah, that's our sense. I mean, I mean, I don't know.
Better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, looking at that, you know, the fines, what percentage do we get as a town from that? We do get something, but it's,
We get a kickback from the state, but the vast majority of it you don't see.
we don't see, okay. Yeah, but,
It doesn't pay for it, the kickback doesn't.
no, I just wasn't
No.
sure, because I wasn't sure what the kickback was, at 10% or 15 or 20%, I don't know what it
And
is.
it's also only the people who pay, so.
Well, of course,
There's gonna be a
yeah,
lot of people who don't pay their fines.
Don't pay the
That's very
fine,
true.
and we don't get the money.
that is true.
I think it would.
So what's the decision of the board? You wanna put it in the budget and take it up at town meeting as a discussion on that line item? Now, having said that, you remember, they can say, take it out, or we wanna reduce it. They can't tell you to take that specific line item out. They can tell you to reduce the budget by $6,000, but they can't tell you where to do it.
Right, I remember that
So-
previous discussion.
No matter how it is, if we could take $600,000 out of another item and the sheriff's money would still stay there.
Mhm.
So it's a point of, do we do it that way, or do we, put it on the agenda, the warning is an item.
I mean, as I recall the discussion, don't rely on my memory, but
Well, go ahead.
that this was a test, but that doesn't necessarily, and if it was working, there was no
It's gonna
sense that it
continue.
could be continued and kept in the budget, but
Right.
not that it had to be only 1 year. That's my memory of.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I remember it.
Yeah, I would agree with
But
that.
there was a feeling that, let's
That's
see
what I
if it
thought.
works.
Right,
That was definitely the, statement.
and they are, according to their reports, stopping people. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
where in all of those places, but
They do list somewhat locations.
yeah, some of them they do, some of them they
Yeah.
don't, but
Right.
they are stopping speeders in Rockingham, and also doing, I think there was some other
Drug
safety things.
interactions and stuff.
Yeah, and also like, are they on their
I
cell
saw
phone,
one.
or, those kind of,
I saw a report from them
Yeah.
Right.
that Scott had sent out.
so they clearly are stopping people and giving them warnings and tickets.
Yep.
So our choice right now is either just put it in the budget or make it an article to be voted on.
Right, that's what we're talking. It's in the budget, then if somebody can bring it up and
Right.
discuss it at that point, or we put it on the agenda on the warning as a separate article, and it gets voted again.
Just
But
like,
at this
just like
point,
last time.
But at this point, if we're gonna do that, then let's clarify the warning article to say, this is not a one-time,
Right.
somehow we wanna word that article that it'll be a continuing process down the road.
Going forward, town of Rockingham will.
Right,
I think my thought would be to put it on as an article.
Yeah, that's kind of my
Because
feeling
it-
too.
Highlights it and people will have a good chance to discuss it and, it's a good chance to review that with the voters and see how people are feeling about it.
I think so too. I mean, it was interesting, how a lot of people change their mind at the meetings.
If you go either way, they could say,
Co-
take it out, or they could say increase it, so
But,
you're not gonna know.
hopefully, we're gonna have better attendance this coming year for a variety of reasons. And it might be good to have a broader discussion and more people involved.
And could we invite the sheriff to present?
We could if because he travels around to almost all the town meetings anyway, just,
He might be there.
especially, he's gonna be at Westminster, because they're giving them mucho more bucks on our $6,000 bids.
Sure.
So, the $80,000, what they're sold down to Westminster, he's gonna show up down there and not, you know, because you're not gonna know where it's gonna come up on the morning until we get it printed.
But by then, we'll have a 6-month report out of
Yeah.
them. of
Yeah.
their
We
meeting.
we
Would be
should
get a
let them know what's
sense of-
happened, the discussion's gonna happen.
Well, we should get a report, so the
Yeah.
board can look at it before we have to settle on the budget and adopt it.
Well, and also the taxpayers can get the report at the town meeting or prior to town meeting. We can post the
Yeah.
report so that they can see what they have to
Yeah.
do.
We have the report out to them in plenty of time to pick it up
Yeah.
at the various
Right.
spots.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they'll have specific questions. How many people did you pull over? What'd you pull them over for? How much did you find? If he were there, he just.
Well, he can put that in the report like he gave to us.
Could, but does everyone read the report?
That's true.
Well, I mean, it's up to them. They're taxpayers making a vote. They need to,
They
they
should,
need to
but
inform
do
themselves.
Are you saying you want a report of that in the book? Like,
Well,
every
probably ought to be.
report?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it
there
better
should
be.
be. I mean, of course, it's only gonna be a 6-month report,
Right,
but,
it's only a 6
so
month
people
review.
have to
So
know
kind
that
of like the
that's.
select board does a report, maybe we add it to there, or,
They should, no, because all
It's
those
just
other
because those
entities
reports are-
probably, the sheriff generally puts his own.
so we'll ask him for one.
Yeah, we ask him
Okay.
for
Give us
one.
a 6
That's the
month,
best
because
way.
they'll only
Just a
have from
6 month.
July 1
Right.
till
January.
January.
Right, okay, that's good.
So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you put it as a warning, I mean, an article,
Right.
you definitely have to make it,
that's decided.
Do we have another question?
make it that
Jamie,
it's,
you got your hand up again? Aren't you tired
we're
of
not
that
doing
arm
this a
going on?
third time.
No, it's my finger that's getting tired, Peter, clicking the raise and lower my hand. So please don't take it wrong in regards to this $6,000. But part of the discussions throughout, all the boards and everything are EMS and police coverage, right? So the discussion last year to put the $6,000 in and do the study was a one-time, and it was conveyed, whether it was captured or not, doesn't matter, to see if it was viable to have the sheriff's department. I'm not questioning that they don't do their job and it's not worth it. The issue lies with Bellows Falls residents, also Rockingham residents, already pay a large portion for police coverage. Now, Saxon's River contracts separately and pays for their police coverage. So if we just automatically put $6,000 into rural Rockingham, what happens in years to come if something changes? Well, it's how we've always done it, and we didn't have a discussion. Let's just add some more money to it, because we know the state police are getting more and more stretched thin. All our EMS and first responders are getting, stretched thin. So we just need to have a discussion about this, and moving forward, what is that number going to be and what's the chances of it going up? Because Bellows Falls residents are definitely taxed enough for their police coverage, right? So if the town is going to take over that, when does Saxon's River come and say, well, if you're paying for rural Rockingham, why aren't you paying for Saxon's River, right? So it should be a separate article, and I appreciate you discussing it. And I just think it needs to be a good discussion. And last year there was no article, there was no prior discussion. It happened on the floor, which is important for having, a town meeting in person to make discussions and decisions like this. So I'm not against it. I just think we need to have a discussion. If we're going to do this in the future, we just all need to discuss it. We just can't stuff it into public safety, right? So
What we just decided, Jamie, it's gonna be on the warning as an article.
It was
Yeah.
an article last year as well.
Yeah, it was an article.
It was a separate article last year.
Yep. It was.
So that's what we're.
it was. Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the presentation of major capital projects and proposed debt schedule? There's a big spreadsheet in your packet here, so two of them actually, so I'll let Scott and Melissa handle this.
What? No, well, are we done with operating? Are we gonna have any other conversation about operating? Are we
I guess we.
Are we done with it? Is there any further?
on the operating budget before
On the
we jump into
budget?
capital and any other questions, concerns?
There wasn't anyone I asked earlier, and then we got
Okay, okay. I just wanted
sidetracked
to-
Elijah might have had.
on the discussion with the police.
Given up on that.
So that's got decided, so you can run the rendition of what we
Got it.
came up with and
Sure, we'll modify.
and then next week we can see where we end up.
Okay. So I guess
No,
on,
not next week, next meeting, excuse me.
the major capital, as we sort of discussed in that initial rambling rant by myself, was the ongoing support for the three major projects, which are the train station, work in this building, and then the meeting house. And I think we're at a point with, again, every one of these, we're leveraging multiple other sources of funds. So it does seem sometimes that we're moving slowly, but I think the deliberate speed is critical to making sure that we maximize our opportunities to find these outside funding sources and to be able to leverage as much of that money as we can. So in this year's capital, because we are final payments on two of our previous equipment purchases, you'll see that you have that $195,000 of principal that will clear once this year's budget payments are made. And what I'm proposing to you is that we take and offset some of that with some additional borrowing, which we had laid out for the grader, which is about a $280,000 piece of equipment. Once you get the trade-in, we would take a request for you to support the $110,000 capital equipment grant application, and then the balance of that, the $170,000, would be the borrowing. On the train station itself, as Gary walked through some of the phasing, we're asking for that additional borrowing authorization for the $150,000 to match his additional request for supporting the Chrissy grant, which is a $1.8 million number. And then on the meeting house, looking at, on that first phase, an additional $125,000, which is leveraging our current $360,000 Save America's Treasures grant, plus an additional $11,000 for a grant that we just received on the roof. And then the third leg of that would be the phase 2 work that Walter is going to be applying for in March, which is the National Park Service. And I can never pronounce this correctly. It's the semi-sesquicentennial funds. So it's 250th anniversary of significant buildings that predate 1800. So that's why the meeting house is one that's eligible for that, and the max that you can ask for on an individual location is $750,000. So that's where we came up with the additional request for the $675,000. So the new borrowing that we would be asking you for is a total of $680,000. $570,000 would be traditional, just 5-year capital improvement bonds, and then the additional 5-year $110,000 would come from the state capital equipment fund. Just the rough calculations that I did based on a 6% payment, which is what the banks told me they're quoting now, on the $570,000 number is about $135,000 a year payback on a 5-year payback. And again, on the $110,000 2% capital equipment fund money, that's about a $25,000 a year payback on a 5-year payback. So you're looking at roughly $170,000 in new cost to replace the loss of the $195,000, which will be coming. So you see a net decrease in your borrowing expenses going forward, based on that current request.
Open the question, Scott.
Yes.
If we don't, what's the scenario if we don't get the grants? How does the budget work?
And for which building?
Well, let's say the meeting house, we don't get the duo
I know, the 250th anniversary, it's easier to say that. Then at that point, his phase two work, he would have to look at other sources like the Paul Broom grants and other National Park Service grants to help offset that phase two cost. So the windows and the interior finishes. But the exterior building, we feel, would be completely done. So the timber frame repairs, the roof repairs, the structural reinforcing, and then the required ground disturbances for the new foundation, and then putting the building back in place. That would all be covered in the first phase.
Okay.
And we have monies for that. So with this 150, we feel pretty good that that would be all done.
So we're authorizing you to borrow up to
Correct.
that amount, but you might not need it all.
If we get good bids and those numbers come back and we're under, absolutely, we won't borrow. We'll only borrow to what we have to do to finish that first phase.
Okay.
And the same thing applies for town hall. I'd asked for $125,000 for this building to finish the windows that were started in this building 3 years ago and then stopped because our contractor got sick and couldn't continue, as well as some of the brickwork on the exterior. And the big unknown, is everybody's pointed out, is the $500,000 from the MARP program, but we should know that fairly early on, and if that's not successful, then we're gonna go for alternate routes to get that project done as well. I wouldn't do the windows or do the bricks until we know for sure that the roof is done.
All right, and is there any such thing as like an adjustable, I mean, rates are really high now, we're borrowing money now, it'll be expensive money. If rates drop, will we ever get the benefit of that, or are they locked in?
Well, you won't have, first of all, you can't borrow till at least July, right? So your authorization, if you go and put this on and it's approved at town meeting, the earliest that you would borrow money would be July of next year. So whatever the rates are at that point, and we would by then have some idea when we would have to go out and go to market. So we try to see what would be in our benefit. If we're seeing a succession of rate cuts, then we would probably try to get the best rate we could get.
Okay.
Since these are only 5-year bonds, very few of those are refundable within the window.
Yeah.
If it's a 30-year or a 40-year, a lot of those do have 10-year refundable options, but these won't.
Okay.
Because they're such short term.
So this whole borrowing situation is gonna be a warning article or something?
Correct.
Okay.
If the board approves this overall approach,
Right.
that'll be part of our discussion
Okay.
on January 2nd.
Yep,
Correct.
okay.
Would they be put on as separate articles, or?
We combine them in one and just.
I think you would have two specific articles. One would be for improvements to municipal buildings, and one would be for acquisition of equipment. And then there would be the funding for, within that subsect, it would list the total, but then we would also have narrative information so people knew what they were paying, or what we were asking them to help pay for.
And then for that equipment purchase, I mean, there's nothing left in the equipment fund that we can put towards that. This is above and beyond what's
This is
available
right.
in the Christmas fund, the fund,
Yep.
okay.
And that loader is probably one of the most heavily utilized pieces of apparatus for
Yes, very essential.
gravel roads, snow
Very
removal. It's a heavily used piece of equipment.
And I think we put that off for several years, replacing that, if I remember right. I think we talked about this about 5 years ago.
We get like Athens, remember how they went through the stuff over there, just patching it, welding it.
It's the grader, not the loader.
Oh, it's a grader.
I'm sorry, grader. I
Yeah.
keep saying loader. I know, it's grader.
Well, they're both used basically, but anyway.
My bad.
You need a 4-year-old boy to correct you.
Exactly. It's like dinosaurs.
But then
right?
what-
I know the right name of the dinosaur.
That's Alyssa's job.
You're gonna take away my job.
Keep saying no, that's all.
Well,
Okay, are we all set with that? So we move along to item 7. Authorized application for 110K Vermont Municipal Loan Fund, that's what Scott just was talking about.
Right, so there is this very specific grant application, and I just wanted to get authorization from the board to go ahead and apply for the funds, just
So we don't have anything to sign today, I only actually just authorize you to
authorize
apply
me
for
to
the.
apply. There wouldn't be anything you'd have to do until we would get a grant agreement, which would be after town meeting. So this just gets us in the process.
So we need a motion to authorize that manager to apply for 110,000 Vermont Municipal Equipment Loan Fund grant. So, loan, so,
So moved.
And seconded.
hey. Who woke her up? This, you have a second too?
Yes, I
All
second.
right, motion was made and seconded to authorize the municipal manager to apply for a $110,000 Vermont Municipal Equipment Loan Fund, a loan, excuse me. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay, motion carried. Move on to item 8, authorize the municipal manager to sign proposed lease, KSI Asset Management.
So Ron is, Glendian, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ron, is on Zoom if he hasn't fallen asleep or we lost him.
Yeah, Ryan, you still awake?
Yeah, I had to check my camera was on when you said I fell asleep. I thought you caught me.
It's okay.
So I gave copies of this, so originally the first lease, Steve Vancuda's office did review, they have a copy of the updated lease. There were a couple items that I think we highlighted in Ron's earlier email to me that the board was aware of. Subsequent to that, and just additional information, there is some changes just in the site portion of the lease because of the route that Green Mountain Power had to take in order to get solar to the site. And I believe they're not significant, but I think some of the language had to change in order to accommodate what was actually constructed on site versus what was initially proposed. So it doesn't specifically change any of your parameters in terms of any of the items that it doesn't create any additional burdens on you. It just literally, they had to put poles in different locations. So he had to change some of that on the lease itself so that it's recorded properly. That's sort of a housekeeping item. Ron, I guess the only thing that's of any discussion, and maybe you might want to give the board some background, is on the lease renewals and the terms of the renewals, because that is something that was different than the prior lease that the board had seen. So maybe you could expound on that a little bit for the board.
Sure. Yes, I'm happy to. There is a renewal terms for the lease. 2 years are at the tenant's option, and then the third one is at a mutual option. The lease amendment has all 3 of them at the tenant's option. This, I apologize, was a mistake originally. Our leases should all be saying that they're at the tenant's option. This is something that we've been getting pushback from our lenders when it comes time to get the projects online. So this project is actually next week, we're expecting Green Mountain Power to come online and turn it on. So we're kind of in the final stages with our lenders. We had hoped to have had all our leases updated. I think maybe this was an older version that had made it through. So this was supposed to be cleaned up. That was a mistake. That was our fault. I also kind of recognize I want to be as respectful as I possibly can, and I'm sensitive too, as well, to you guys. I understand that, right? Novus, Alex Bravakis from Novus had originally started all this. I was not exactly in the details of it. I do not mean this to be at all anything like a renegotiation or anything like that. The background is just simply that it's kind of asks from the lenders that options be a tenant's option.
Can you explain what that means?
Right, so right now, based on your base lease, there was an initial payment which we received, right, when they started the site work of the $50,000. Then there's various renewal terms on the lease that has escalators based on the rent for while they're there and operating. And in the original lease, there was 2, as Ron had said, so 2 5-year options were at their option, and then the third was a mutual option, so both parties had to agree to the third renewal. All this is doing is taking away the mutual, so there would be so the 15-year renewal cycle, which isn't changed, it's in your original lease, that has not changed, would just be, it would be all a tenant option, as opposed to you having, after 10 years, having an option to not renew on that site.
Why would we ever not want to renew?
We have a developer for the site for something else, but
I don't
see that
right
happening.
now, there's nothing that I would say, looking at the site, because we're still on closing of various phases of the bid. And there's still a lot of discussion about ownership of the other abutters. You know, there's one parcel now that's actively being used as a gravel operation privately. And then there's the other property that's still being negotiated and will potentially also be a gravel operation. So there won't be any real long-term reuse of that property until all of that gravel mining is done, because certainly nobody's going to develop anything of any type with that kind of intensive use going on.
Right.
Literally right next door as they're digging down to our base level. And you can see, based on some of the elevations, you know, there's 30 or 40 feet worth of excavation that's going to happen over time on those other two parcels.
Right.
So I don't see that you're giving up anything that I would say, okay, we should, you know, think about this or maybe come back. I think that your rights are still going to be 100% protected and you don't have any particular concerns. I think it's just more of a problem for their financing when they get into their longer term financing and what they have to do on their end.
And when the lease wraps up, they have to remove all
Those lease terms are still there, the return of the site to the condition, all of those terms are still there.
If they go bankrupt, can they walk away from that?
Well, bankruptcy is always a problem. So we would be like any other person in a bankruptcy, we would have some sort of position depending upon who's a protected creditor and who's not.
Yeah.
So, you're not going bankrupt, are you, Ron?
My guess, if they went bankrupt, there would be a buyer right after that, because it's already there.
Right.
So I don't think that's
Sure,
an
because some of these wind turbines that they've walked away from them.
Yeah, I saw that note.
Yeah, that's different, that's a different
Different
game.
game, yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know that the Bartonsville residents would love to have solar panels there for the future forever, because that, we don't want something coming in that's gonna interrupt the rural character of that area and maybe a lot of noise, and so I think we're.
A large parcel with frontage on 103 has a lot of interesting
possibilities.
Yep. That's a good way of putting it.
Okay, thanks.
So are we all comfortable with this situation? And let's take a motion to authorize the municipal manager to sign proposed lease.
I move that we authorize the municipal manager to sign the lease with KSI Management.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we authorize the manager to sign proposed lease with KSI Asset Management. Any further discussion?
I have one question, but it's not related to the lease.
Okay.
Okay. Rick?
No.
All right, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Just a question about where the Green Mountain Power had to move those poles. Was it closer to Savage's or the other way?
Based on, I'll have to show this to you, based on the initial plus what he sent me here, could pass those to Sue. So I believe it's a little closer, a little farther away from Savage's, the as-built.
Yeah, because
Not significantly though.
okay, yeah, because just as a, when you start talking about right of ways, you don't want it to take off, preventing us to use that other part of the parcel. Because they move their right of way further north.
No, and
But it
everything
doesn't
out there
affect
is
that.
constrained because you've got a wetlands there, plus you've got now the solar array, and now you've got a utility
Yeah.
easement. So that portion is pretty well constrained.
Yeah, okay, so it
The
doesn't
southern
impact,
portion is really where there's less.
yeah, so it doesn't impact any future use of that other
Yeah.
parcel. That was my only concern. Okay.
Okay, we're all set there. You have the copy for the lease there. Come on.
Thank you very much, but I just wanted to also really say, I really appreciate you guys taking the time and the attention. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for staying with us this long, Ron.
I gotta do some stuff, so we'll take care of it, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to 9 is the updated brownfields locations and associated cleanup action. There's a information in your packet. Gary, you want to address this, or are you still with us, or?
Sure.
I had asked Gary to do this just because there's been so many different properties with different stages of cleanup and what's required, and I thought I lose track, so I'm sure at some point the board loses track, so I'd asked him just to sort of give us all a snapshot, which is helpful.
Yeah, so this is basically an outline of active current brownfield work in the community. And I think, Scott was referring at the joint board meeting, a more full outline of the area-wide plan and the situation with all of the brownfields projects. So this is a snapshot. The bigger picture shows all of the parcels in more details in terms of what's been found on, and so a lot of them, there's not active brownfields, but there's things like there were underground storage tanks that were moved, or site work was done, there was cleanup, and there's nothing more to be done. So that's the full picture, and it's a very large spreadsheet with a lot of details. And this is more today, what's going on in Bellows Falls today with brownfield work. And yeah, I guess I could answer any questions if you have them, but it's just a simple snapshot, as Scott said.
Okay, any questions?
I have one. Yep. Gary, all of the projects related to brownfields work is all within Bellows Falls. Is that correct? There are no other brownfield sites
Well, so
currently
the
active?
more comprehensive picture would have, like there was brownfields work done at the, next to Main Street Arts, that building there. And there's been, if you look all over town, there have been more. I'm not really up to speed on all of them. Bellows Falls being the industrial center, pretty, not true with all of the neighborhood, but pretty much any of the commercial industrial areas, there's a good chance that you'll find something with some brownfield work.
Gary, the Atkinson Street property, that's the intersection that we're applying for a grant for all these improvements.
66?
66 is right on that corner. Will there be any coordination required between the planning for that intersection and the brownfields?
I don't think so. There's some lead in the soil from paint on the building, so the building was demolished, the paint was old and peeling a lot.
Yep.
And the other contamination that we found there just seems to be from traffic going by. So mostly like where vehicles stop at the stop sign and idle, the type of contamination is what's in exhaust from vehicles. So I think it'll be a pretty simple soil cleanup from that, and not, so where all the soils are is not, I don't believe is anywhere where intersection work is being done, the road, the sidewalk.
I think the longer term discussion the board needs to think about is what types of reuse would you consider for that property, and how would you want to go about discussing and planning that work? So that's really, hopefully the Brownsfield work will give you some sense of timing, so then you can start to think about how you might want to approach the next phase.
Okay.
The school is very interested in talking to you, as you can well imagine, since they're a neighbor.
And so that is a good point. When it comes to the corrective action plan, they're gonna want to know the end use of the property, because there are different thresholds for cleanup. So not so much the intersection work, but what Scott referring to with the end use, that has to be coordinated with the brownfield work.
And would your office be in charge of working with prospective purchases of that land? Who would be responsible for that?
Well, so statutorily, the municipal manager is for any town-owned properties, but a lot of that legwork is delegated to the Planning and Development Office.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Okay, let's
Thank
go.
you. That's-
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
All right, there is a encapsulation of the Rockingham Meeting House projects in your packet for information purposes. That being said, let's go to review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. Take a motion.
I move to approve orders, bills, and warrants.
Do we hear a second?
I will second.
Motion made second to approve orders, bills, and warrants. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. As they're coming around. That's the only one. Let's start this way. Okay. All right, agenda items for the January 2nd, 2024 meeting. We're there, folks, pretty close.
No. So we'll have a draft warning for you to review. On that warning, we'll have the update to the social services levy that we talked about. So it'll be the level funding, and then there'll be further guidance as we go forward with what the board has discussed and then what the committee also discussed. I'll include the warning that included on the sheriff, the contracted. We're hoping also that at least exercise the purchase option on the train station, which will kick off that 6-month window to complete the purchase and sale and the draft lease. And then we'll have an update to you on where we stand with our animal control officer and what's happening with that.
Okay, agenda items for the joint board at the end of the month, January 30th.
We'll have
Time for that.
a preliminary tax sale list. We'll have a expanded discussion on the Zero Bridge Street and some of the related information about that, more detail, and hopefully the first discussion of the draft information from the fire feasibility. I'd hoped to have them here to be able to meet with the boards that night, but there was one of the principals is having some surgery, so he wasn't gonna be able to travel then. So we're gonna have to try to find another time where maybe we can do that and have him come so we can get everybody at one time.
We have them on Zoom?
I'm gonna try to get him on Zoom at least, yes, but I was hoping he would be here physically to talk to the board directly, but he can't, unfortunately, he's got something already scheduled. We'll work around that the best we can.
Okay, other business, start with Rick.
Nothing?
Elijah?
No.
Gary, this guy that's trying to do this solar array out there on 121, he keeps emailing me that he wants to come to the board to get a sign off on that project.
So the planning commission addressed the preferred site, gave him a letter. He wants something from the select board concurring.
Okay, he just needs a sign off. He wants to get on the agenda, and I didn't want to tell him what date we wanted to put him on until I talked to you, so. So if you have a form or something that you need, or?
We could come up with something for you. You want a template for him to request authorization for?
I don't know what he's looking for. He just said he wanted to get on the agenda. He had to have a sign off quick. He had to have it done right off, so.
Is that the Stickney property?
No, that is on, right across from, the bridge that goes across Saxon River, goes over to Barber's Park.
Oh, yeah.
That house that sets, fireman sets back, it's all on the back side, so you're not gonna see it from, Gary's got a map, he can fax you and send it out to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I could put a packet together that is the same thing the planning commission looked at and include their letter and Wyndham Regional letter. I think all of those sites have to go before the Public Service Board and get authorization from them. And in the Stickney project. So they're both at the planning commission at the same time. Stickney project, they came to the select board right at the beginning. They reached out to you guys. So he's kind of new at this and has been a little bit behind the curve and looked at what they did and said, oh, I need to get something from the select board. So
I'm trying to get that.
if you're up for it,
He's nervous, he's trying to make sure all the spaces are covered before he gets caught short somewhere.
But he's already,
It's a letter.
yeah, but he's already has it from the other two.
he has it
from
from the
Wyndham Regional
planning
and
commission, he has it from the
Okay.
Wyndham Regional
Right.
Commission.
Okay,
I don't know, it just keeps emailing, I just don't much like talk to Gary and give him an answer.
So January 2nd.
So,
Yeah, whatever background you have would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so the board.
It's got a map and everything.
Yeah,
It's,
that'd be good.
yeah, I was surprised when Tim Allen owns that property.
Oh.
Yeah, so anyway. All right, Sue?
I'm all set, other than I just want to compliment again how beautiful town looks. And how I've had so many people tell me how much fun they had at that, parade.
The parade, yes.
So
that's great.
I just want to say kudos to everyone, including, you've been very involved too. So
A lot of people, many people made all.
many people did, but
Great job.
it needs someone to push, and you've been very good at that.
Yeah.
Only one of them, only one of the people pushing hard.
There's more than just one. That was Bonnie?
Yeah, and one thing, we're probably gonna be starting our survey, last day of December, first day of January, I'm not sure, it depends on the printer. So we're gonna need assistance from, town manager's office, we need, somebody to dump on it and put it on the website. And we need, we have 4 locations to put printed versions of it. Rick talked to Saxon's Market, and I spoke with Miles at the bookstore, and Pam at the library, and the lady at the senior center.
Okay.
So we're hoping you can print for us 100 copies of it, and give us 4 of these. So we want to get some clipboards and put out the surveys and have this on there, put your completed survey in here. And then Rick and I will be in charge of picking them up.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll work with you on that.
Probably won't get it the last day of December, first day of January.
No.
Let's shoot for the second.
I just have one question.
Well, what, around there, they're coming up.
Peter's got a
I
question.
just have one question. Why was Lee Size left out of this? And I'm not favoring anything, the only reason I'm asking because I had to fill that town report box I had up there several times with town reports.
Maybe we
So
should
that
add,
shows a lot of
We can
people were
add
going
them,
through
yeah.
that.
let's add
And they're
Lisa.
not, because it'll outshoot the village market sector 10 times over.
Okay,
There's
Well,
more
we just-
traffic going in Lee
We just
Size.
didn't have anything in Saxon River, that's all. That's why we did that.
No, I know, I realize
Yeah,
that.
but-
In Saxon River, I left some at the market, but I had to steal theirs because they weren't going anywhere. I took, when we
Yeah.
ran out the office, so.
Well, I'll talk to them, down on these sides, you know, it's something,
Yeah, see Gary or Mike, either one, or I can
Gary,
tell them,
Gary.
I can ask them.
if you know them, maybe
I
you
know,
should ask.
yeah, I'll ask them. They
Because
aren't gonna
they-
give,
they might
they
get
won't say
paid
anything, because you put them right out on the vestibule where you come in.
Right,
Right.
and then people take them home and then bring them back, that's the idea.
And that, they can fill them out right there if they, both, they're probably, that time of the year, they're probably gonna take them home.
Yeah, take 'em.
They're not
Yeah.
gonna stay there, fill them out.
Stand there, yeah.
Right.
There's a chance you may not get them back.
Right,
Yeah,
that's true,
yeah,
but that's a
yeah.
chance you're gonna take.
But they'd also be able
I
to
guess
take them home and drop
yeah,
them off
if
at
you,
another
um,
location, of course.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
If
They
you know
go
them,
around
they'll
town,
probably
too.
better.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Just let me
I'll
know.
check with tomorrow, I'll email you.
Okay, great.
And town hall will be a drop-off point too. People want to just drop their surveys off here. Scott, we'll have an envelope here.
Okay.
That's something you might wanna put a little note on the thing that says, if you know, drop off points, so that people know, they don't get back to the same spot, they can take it somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
otherwise,
we're gonna have,
we print it,
the postcard, we're gonna update the postcard to say all these locations.
Okay, yeah.
but also the
And that should
surveys.
be
Just so
on,
they know they can, you know, like I
Right.
said, if they take it home, then they
they
say,
can
oh,
put
I
it back
don't
here,
have to
or
go back
they
there.
can
but from-
mail it in too. And we have to say the survey will end last day of January,
Right,
so you gotta mail it in by then. And we'll update what we want the town website to say, and what we want our postcard to say if we have it all sorted out.
And we'll need a slot at the town meeting to explain, to share the results.
Yeah.
We'll do it on the other business, because it's not involving any expenditure funds. Paul will announce that route thing, and then we'll just, and I'll tell the director, right, you can.
And,
Alright.
it would be nice to be able to, it won't be closed yet, but for the, joint boards, we can give an update, because we'll have the results from the online.
Right.
Just tell them, you know, where it stands at that point.
On my notes.
Okay, we're all set with that. There's no need for an executive session that I can see, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
There's Jamie question.
Oh, Jamie, you back again?
Well, so I wasn't gonna raise my hand, but I couldn't get an answer to my question. So we just breezed over the brownfield current issues, things that have been resolved, things that have been done. I was wondering if that information was gonna be made public on the town website. Oh, just got it. Yes, we'll post the update. All right, thank you very much.
We'll post
Okay.
it, Jamie. Yes, sorry about that, it didn't send, it sent.
Right, so that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. We're out of here, folks. Thanks.
This meeting was recorded by Falls Area Community Television, located at 1 Hospital Court, Bellows Falls, Vermont. If you would like a copy of the meeting, our phone number is 802-463-1613, or email us at fact810@gmail.com. Falls Area Community TV, keeping government honest.